In tonight's workshop, we're going to cover laser weight loss. Okay, and I'm going to explain this a little bit. The subline here, the easiest weight loss, the easiest weight you'll ever lose safely. There's a reason and a purpose why I put the cartoon character background on here. It's not it's not to diminish the process of weight loss. It's not to take it away, and disregard it as a serious issue, because for a lot of people this is a very serious issue. This is one that they've tried everything. Some people have gone and exercised relentlessly. They've changed their diets completely. All these different things, and yet still been frustrated. So the purpose in putting this on here with the cartoonish is more the marketing side of it. That you can imagine when you get into something that is relatively simple to lose weight, it's bound to get marketed in every ridiculous way you can possibly imagine. So at some point in time, once it catches fire, if you will, then you're going to have people say melt 10 pounds in 5 minutes. And you're going to see plastic signs on the sides of the road that say 2 sessions beats 3 months in the gym, or whatever. I mean, people will use every single marketing tactic possible to inflate the truth. And so more of this is to give the warning of it's not really that simple. It's not that it shouldn't be taken that lackadaisically in terms of what you really need to be doing, because this is, in fact, probably the easiest weight that you'll ever lose safely if done correctly. But also done incorrectly, as we're going to talk about tonight, is where you can really start to get into trouble with some of this stuff. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that so nobody's offended by the fact that we're using cartoon characters to explain all this. Okay, there was a purpose behind there. Okay, and it makes a great keynote background, doesn't it? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Okay, so we're going to start talking about this adipose tissue. Okay, an average human adult has around 30 billion fat cells, weighing about 30 pounds of their total body weight. Okay, that's according to statistics. 30 pounds of body weight comes down to these adipose cells. Okay, adipocytes play a primary role in lipid storage, primarily in the form of triglycerides and cholesterol ester. Okay, 2 words that, of course, we equate with absolutely everything awful now, right? Oh, triglycerides, they're terrible. Cholesterol is terrible. Yet isn't it funny that these are the very things that fat cells store? Which implies they are to serve a purpose, which of course they do. Both of these are normal, natural things in the body when they're in a natural form, when they're used properly, when they're not in overabundance. Kind of like insulin, right? Insulin, you might look at if all you've ever heard is diabetes talk, insulin sounds like a bad word. Your kids would be like, oh, insulin, that's associated with disease. No, insulin is what keeps you from disease, when it's in its proper fashion. Okay, same thing with these. These are building blocks within the body and energy producers within the body. Okay, it also plays a role. Adipose tissue plays a role in hormone production, such as leptin for appetite and metabolism. Okay, so fat plays a very critical role in the optimum storage and release. Think of it as time-released energy. That's the way it's supposed to work, is that your body stores away fat. Think about a bear, right? A bear eats a bunch of stuff, it gets chubby, it goes into hibernation, and it slow burns that energy while it doesn't eat, right, during hibernation. So that's its role. That's what it's supposed to do. Okay, it also secretes molecules involved in inflammation, which triggers other metabolic and immune system cascades. Yeah, it's part of the immune system as well, as we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight in addition. Okay, there's 2 things to really understand. There's 2 types of fat. There's the visceral fat and there's subcutaneous fat. Okay, and there's big differences between the 2. So visceral fat is a fat around your internal organs. Typically what you see with the visceral fat, it doesn't really talk about it here in the notes, but this is where you see people with pendulous abdomens, and you guys know, and you might be able to sort of relate people that like they just look like they have a very hard stomach, and it's big and it's round, but you push on it, it's very hard. There's nothing squishy to it. Okay, that's visceral fat. That's internal fat. It's inside of the skin. It's inside of the musculature. And so it's really surrounding the internal organs. Okay, then there's a subcutaneous fat, which is just right below the skin level. This is the stuff that you can grab and is squishy and movable, that most people equate with fat, the rolly type of fat, right? So there's a difference between those two, and usually people have both. They have a combination of both. Okay, but the visceral fat has greater blood flow because it's around the internal organs. So it's inside, it's got greater blood flow, which means it's got greater access to nutrients, it's got greater access to energy, and in addition to that, it makes it also easier to deal with. It makes it easier to get rid of because it's got easier access to all the lines. You can come on in. You can deliver. That's one to Facebook Live. Just duck and run. This is also, the visceral fat is a sign of insulin resistance, okay? When you have insulin resistance, you tend to build up visceral fat, this internal fat. So people that you see with the big pendulous abdomens, they probably are insulin resistant, and that's a key sign that they're going to likely end up, if they're not already diagnosed with diabetes, they're walking down that path, okay? There's a more beta-adrenergic receptors, which means it enhances fat release, okay? So these cells actually burn more readily. This fat type burns more readily. It's around, the internal tissues, so it's just easier access, and it tends to want to burn for energy, okay? Subcutaneous fat, on the other hand, it has a decreased blood flow. It has very little blood flow. So it's not quite as easy to access. It's not as readily moved away by the lymphatic system. Okay, it has decreased sensitivity to catecholamines, so it doesn't listen to hormones quite as well. It has an increased sensitivity to insulin. Insulin is the hormone that actually packs away sugars, right? That's the insulin. That's the hormone that when you're a diabetic, you take the insulin, which tells your body cram away that sugar. So all those receptors around those fat cells, they get insulin attached to them, and they start drawing in sugars until, and I've talked about this in a lot of the diabetic workshops and stuff in the past, eventually those cells get stuffed. They get overfilled, and they can't listen anymore because it doesn't matter if the insulin binds to those receptors, they can't fit any more contents into the cell. So that's what we call insulin resistance. So is it really insulin resistance, or is it just, there's no more room? So it doesn't matter if it's listening or not. There's no more room to put anything else. You're limited to 30 billion fat cells, and once they're full, they're full. Okay, so then it starts to just dump over that extra sugar into your blood system, which causes all the havoc that you see associated with diabetes, late stage diabetes, with sores and gangrene, losing limbs, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So these cells have an increased sensitivity to insulin, so they want to pack away fats much easier. It's also a sign of leptin resistance. Leptin is another hormone that is very much involved in the regulation of energy and in weight gain, weight loss. This is one of those targets that the drug companies have tried to get in, working on different medications that can affect leptin levels, because this would be essentially the holy grail of weight loss pills, that they can somehow deal with that, but so far have failed. There's also more alpha-adrenergic receptors, which means it blocks fat release. So as opposed to the visceral fat, which tends to enhance fat release, this has that ability to block it, so you don't lose it as easily. This is always, as a result, subcutaneous fat is always the last thing to go. So what you see is people that are skinny and fit, but maybe a mom that's had kids and has that little bit of remaining pudge right here that you just can't get rid of, or the little sides, but otherwise they're skinny, right? But there's just that little bit that's left over no matter what they do. That is this type of fat. It's very difficult to get rid of. Okay, and of course that's a pretty cool picture of adipose cells under a very powerful microscope. It's always awesome looking at the body down at that level. It's mind-boggling. Okay, so looking at the hormones and how hormones play into all this. Okay, you look at the receptors that are found on adipocytes, and you see these are not just simple cells. It's not just, we tend to look at it like, look at the marketing involved in, I don't know if I want to use a trade name openly, but the cold process sculpting, which you guys could probably put 2 and 2 together there, of freezing fat. Okay, so they say that, you go in and you freeze the fat cells, which kills the fat cells selectively, and now you've got rid of all the bad fat cells, right? Well, think about this, okay? Your fat cells, your adipocytes, have thyroid-stimulating hormone receptors for glucagon, androgen, estrogen, thyroid hormone, glucocorticoid, vitamin D, interleukin-6, TNF-alpha, gastrin, glucagon-like peptide 1, angiotensin 2, leptin, growth hormone, insulin. It has all these different receptors on the cell that are all there to coordinate all these different mechanics of their function. So, it's kind of like your gallbladder or your appendix or your tonsils. Oh, you don't need that. We can just go ahead and remove that organ from your body and everything will be just fine. Well, no, it's not. We found well after the fact, no, it's not. Those organs do serve a purpose. And we're going to learn, as we learn more and more about fat cells, that they play a very important role too. We just have, because of our lifestyle and our environments, unfortunately, it's just not in a proper balance. Okay? So, subcutaneous fat has estrogen receptors as well as receptors for thyroid hormone and thyroid-stimulating hormone, glucagon, androgen, glucocorticoid, vitamin D, growth hormone, leptin, gastrin, and others to show the complexity at hand. It can also produce and store estrogen. Listen to that. It produces and stores estrogen, okay? Which is why very lean women can stop menstruating. People that are bulimic or anorexic, a lot of times they just, once they hit a certain point, they stop menstruating altogether. They can never get pregnant. It's because of the dramatic effect that it has on their estrogen levels. Okay, too much fat, and it's easy to become estrogen dominant. And what, of course, do we see in our culture now? We see, the vast majority of women are estrogen dominant when we do the test. Okay, if you guys have never done this before, you might want to write down this website. There's a website, johnleemd.com. So JOHNLEEMD.com. You can get on there, and there's a free online hormone questionnaire. It's very simple. You just answer a number of questions, and then it gives you a breakdown at the bottom as to if you're estrogen dominant, progesterone deficient, estrogen deficient, testosterone deficient. Like, it can use those symptoms to kind of tell you where you are without having to do an expensive blood test. And we find that it's almost always accurate because it's put together by the guy that wrote the book on hormones, Dr. John Lee. The guy is unfortunately he's not around anymore, but the website still exists and still offers a lot of information on there. So testosterone, on the other hand, being too high or too low, have the same effect of increasing visceral fat, which correlates with cardiovascular risk. So typically when you see guys that have pendulous abdomens, when do you typically see that? You see that happen more and more as they hit 40s, 50s, 60s, the bellies start going out. What do you know about testosterone? It starts to deplete around that age too, so it starts dropping. So people that have a balance of testosterone, men in particular, tend to have more flat abdomens, and everything seems to they look fit for the most part. But once you start seeing that belly go out, it's typically because of a testosterone imbalance. So of course there's a high correlation of pendulous abdomens with Viagra, and these other medications used for dysfunction in that regard too. Next one here, menopause causes a drop-off in estrogen. And as a result, fat storage can shift from subcutaneous, meaning around the hips and thighs, to visceral or abdominal storage. So you see during these stages of life where the hormones change, you see body shape change as well too. So you go from being a high school girl and you hit college, and in through that area you start to see a lot of changes as the hormones start to develop and change, moving into that new phase of life. And it doesn't just have to do with eating and drinking and all that stuff that we commonly relate it to, but you see that happen again as you hit menopause. You start to see those same type of changes in the body starting to change its shape. Okay, so cellulite. The appearance of cellulite is caused by tension of connective tissue as a result of overstuffed adipose cells. So this is a great graphic here that shows how you have these connective tissue fibers that connect the fascia superficialis underneath the fat cells to the epidermis on the top. So this connective tissue is what keeps everything together, so that your skin isn't sliding all over the place, and it's got that elasticity and everything to it. It keeps it all tented in place and keeps everything intact, right? But when you start to fill those fat lobes inside, they start to expand. What happens is you get this tension on these bands. Okay, so one option, of course, would be to go in, and of course that happens when you do traditional liposuction. And you take one of those wands and you start jamming around inside the skin. Yeah, exactly. You guys' faces sum it up. I can't imagine, but they take that wand and it's just, the suck wand, and it's just sucking all the fat underneath. Think about the tissue damage that does. And not just to the fat cells, not just to the connective tissue, but to the nerve endings within the skin. And your body has to do it, and capillary beds and everything. It's just appalling when you think about it, that, there's no concern. This is not lifting the rug to vacuum underneath, right? This is a totally different ballgame here. So, but this kind of fits in with the cold process, right? That when you remove those fat cells now there's nothing left there to work as part of the immune system and for the hormone regulation and everything else that those cells do for serving their purpose, okay? So reducing fat cell content, on the other hand, by actually reducing the contents without removing or damaging the cells, is important because it relieves the tension on these cords, thereby reducing the appearance of cellulite. You don't see those nodules, you don't see the dimpling, because of course the tension is gone. So the skin tends to smooth out once you reduce the size of the cells. All right, so laser. The most common theory for the effectiveness of red light, and at this point it is, from what I gather, still a theory that they haven't just absolutely locked down, that they know exactly how it works, okay? But the best information that's there is that the effectiveness of the red light is that it causes a transitory pore in fat cell membranes to open, releasing its contents into the interstitial space. Now I found, of course, the original studies, these are some of the images from it, and you see these healthy fat cells, and you see that as it's being exposed, you see this little dimple of fat start to pop out here, and then you see it balloon out. And then you see that the fat just continuing to purge outside of the cells, and what you're left with is just this empty sac, this empty fat cell. And then what happens after a short time, those pores, they reclose, the cell heals itself, and I don't even know if heal would be the right word, but it recloses, and then it can be used again, as needed. It's still a healthy, viable cell, it just emptied its contents, okay? But then there's other research studies that say that they weren't able to replicate exactly that mechanism, and so they're unsure if that's it or if it's one of these other factors. But so far, this seems like it makes the most sense, even if who knows who couldn't necessarily replicate it. We don't know what their intentions were in trying to replicate it. Maybe they were just trying to disprove it because they're into cold process. It's called, I don't know, maybe. These pores generally close in 48 to 72 hours with the fat cells not harmed nor damaged under the surrounding tissues at all. And that's probably the biggest factor because the cells remain intact. You're not doing anything to harm the cells themselves. So they can continue to process hormones. They can continue to deal with the immune system functions. They can continue to store toxins, as we're going to talk about a little bit. They can do all these different factors. But the contents emptied from the fat cells will either be used for energy, transported for elimination, or redeposited in those fat cells after the pore is closed. So they'll start to restore them if it's not properly disposed of, which is important. And the other factors that go along with what you're doing as you're going through this process. Okay? So fat utilization once released. Let's talk about how this works. The fat released from the cells are actually fatty acids and triglycerides. Okay, that's the two forms that they come out in. So you look at this chain here, this process, you've got the food intake, and that comes down proteins, complex carbohydrates, and triglycerides or fats. Okay, this is what we want to focus on looking on here. So your body breaks that down into glycerol and fatty acids. Those are the two things that it merges down into, and then that goes into lipid synthesis and storage, or it goes to energy production, one of those two. So if you don't have enough energy and you need the energy to work, then it goes this way and it moves towards ATP production, which is what drives all cellular function in the entire body. This is your fuel, okay? When you have an overabundance of fuel and there's no longer a need for it, but the calorie intake is still happening, especially these fats, then it only has one other choice because it can't just continue to produce energy. So the other option is it stores it. It goes through lipid synthesis and storage and packs it away for a later day when you're not so lucky in having enough energy, right? So as long as your intake is within normal limits, you should see this nice little balance between the two. But of course, a lot of different factors, go on there. One of them being, when you live in a first world nation and have unlimited access to foods, and even things that we call foods that may not even necessarily be foods. Just things that are edible doesn't mean it's necessarily food. Okay, so now we look at this in backwards, and you see that the breakdown of this stored fat, or what we know as weight loss, reconverts that back into glycerol and fatty acids. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more. Released contents is drained via the lymphatic system after being released into the interstitial space. So the cells, the fat cells, once they're exposed, it dumps out its contents. Those contents are picked up by the lymphatic system and then brought back to the liver in order for processing. Okay? High levels of epinephrine, otherwise known as adrenaline, and glucagon, glucagon has the effect opposite of insulin to raise glucose levels. So that's what your body produces in order to tell the body increase your glucose levels. So you don't have enough. You need to kick that up. Okay, insulin is what you take to try to pack energy away. Okay, so this high levels of adrenaline, which is released during what? Exercise, right? Aggressive activity. Adrenaline and glucagon, which is also produced during exercise, in the blood stimulates lipolysis, breakdown of fats. Okay, the process in which lipases remove fatty acid chains, right here, from glycerol, to which they are bound in their storage form as triglycerides. Okay, so these fatty acids can now be metabolized via this pathway into ATP for energy. Okay, so your body has to break down, go back through that again. Okay, the fat released is typically in the form of triglycerides and free fatty acids. Those triglycerides are then broken down into fatty acid chains and glycerol, in which they then convert to ATP. Okay, so it's magic how this happens, but your body knows how to burn fat. We just have to create a demand. Okay, so that gets real important when you're dumping off all this fat, because you have to create an energy demand, which means you have to exercise aggressively, right? Because you've got to burn that. And it's also good to limit the food intake so that you have a one-way path moving this way, and it's not just driving it back over this way again. Okay? Now, toxin release. This is probably the biggest concern when it comes to doing lipo laser. It's a toxin release, okay? It's so easy to see the weight, and start seeing the inches come off, especially, when we start seeing the measurements, a lot of people will lose an inch of circumference in just their first treatment. We have patients that have lost over 15 inches of total circumference. So you can see when they do that, the fat cells are storing toxins, and those toxins have to go somewhere. So looking at the research here, persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, including organochlorine pesticides such as DDT. Okay, if you guys don't know, this is a DDT truck going down the beach, spraying the beaches. They used to, anybody remember this? Yeah, you remember this? Okay, were you sprayed? No? Okay, that's good. So they used to go down the beaches spraying this. They used to go around the cities and spray it down the streets. They used to there's all kinds of pictures you can look at them where there's swimming pools and the guys are standing there with a fogger and they're spraying all the kids in the swimming pool and the kids are all jumping around. They told everybody it was completely and totally safe, just like smoking was, just like medications are, just like vaccinations are. Oh wait, we're getting ahead, right? So they told us they were completely safe. We didn't have to worry about it at all, even though some people knew it was toxic all along, okay? So DDT, fungicides, industrial chemicals such as polychlorinated biphenyls used in paint and building materials, and dioxins are highly attracted to lipids and therefore accumulate in adipose tissue. Okay, you can go and you can read this article. It'll be linked in the keynote. This toxic accumulation is likely the strong connection with cancers common to fatty organs such as breast, and why obesity causes increased risk of cancer. Because the more toxins you can't get rid of are stored, the more they consistently pollute the body and cause more and more cellular dysfunction, because the bodies cannot operate normally when they're in the presence of these chemicals. So typically what we see is the more fat people tend to store, the less capable their immune system is of ridding itself, detoxifying itself of chemicals. Okay, people that are more toxic gain more weight. It's as simple as that. Okay, so two things can happen when you purge fat contents. One, you can release the toxins and they get shuttled out of the body through detoxification. Or two, they build up in higher concentration in the remaining fatty tissues. Well, before you did the weight loss, was there more or less fatty tissues? Essentially, there's less, right? Because the content of the cells are decreased. So there's less total volume. So if you started with, say, 30 pounds of fat within those cells, and now you cut it down to 10 pounds of fat, but you weren't able to eliminate all of the toxins stored in that 30 pounds of fat, now you have a higher concentration in the remaining 10 pounds. Make sense? So when that happens, that means you've increased your toxicity levels. It's simple mathematics, right? It's chemistry. So now you can see why you have the opposite thing true. Why is it that some people that are really thin tend to develop these cancers? It almost seems like there's those two ends of the pool. It's either really thin people or it's really, it's larger individuals. And we just think, oh, well, the ones in the middle are the healthy ones. No, a lot of this is it's just balance. It's just chemistry. Okay, so but it's not just that it's a higher concentration of what's remaining. We got to remember that the brain and the nervous system is highly composed of fat. So a lot of times these toxins that are released through detoxification, if they're not properly eliminated from the system, they tend to store up in your brain and nervous system. And that becomes problematic because now we see things like dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all these kind of issues as well. So, I think we can probably look back to a lot of this and get a good idea of where, these problems were developing from. And hopefully we'll get our sense together moving forward as we did with DDT or some of these other things. Speaking of heavy metal accumulation, adipose also stores up heavy metals, just like other persistent toxins in the body, is ill-equipped to eliminate. In fact, the very reason why heavy metals like aluminum and mercury are used as adjuvants in vaccines is actually due to their inability to be eliminated. That's why they choose these metals, is because they know your body can't get rid of simply. Well, then your body would. And then there would not be this persistence to stick around forcing your immune system activation. Okay, so for a vaccine theoretically to work, according to the way that they theorize it works, is we put something persistent in the body called an adjuvant to irritate everything. Therefore, the immune system is overactivated. It looks for things to get activated to, finds the antibodies or deactivated cells or whatever that you injected with those adjuvants and says, that's the problem. And so it builds an immune response to those. But if the adjuvants were simply eliminated, then once it got eliminated, your immune system would, go inactive because there's no longer a persistent problem, right? It's like you had the flu, you get over the flu, now your body doesn't worry about it anymore. But if the flu sticks around, well, then your immune system is always fighting against the flu. That's the whole theory behind vaccines, how they work. So you have to have a persistent adjuvant. So they put these things in there on purpose that your body can't get rid of. And to the level that there's studies, if you get on YouTube, there's one called Quecksilver. Okay, so Quecksilber, and it shows how they did studies where they looked at sheep, where they put amalgam fillings, which is also a form of mercury that your body cannot get rid of. So if you have silver fillings in your teeth, these are mercury fillings. They put mercury fillings into sheep, pregnant sheep. Okay, then once the babies were born, they measured the mercury levels in the baby sheep, and they found that not only the mother had it saturating all of her organs, but the baby had it saturating all of its organs too, because of course it was inside the mother. So that's logical, But the response from the American Dental Association was that the study was invalid because sheep I can't even say it. Sheep chew too much. So they said it was invalid because sheep chew more than humans. So of course I love the irony behind this. I love the cleverness of this. The researchers said, okay, that's fine, we'll accept that. And they repeated the study, this time with monkeys. And guess what they found? Exactly the same thing. So, what do you say now? Monkeys chew too much? So we know that this is a problem, and they know that this is a problem because it's how the whole thing is set up in the first place, understanding their theory. But it's not just vaccinations. Other heavy metals come from environment. You know that there's mercury in the environment from industrial waste. You know that there's aluminum and such. Food, cookware, amalgam fillings, etc. So, my question is this. How much longer will it be until we look at these photos and gasp like we did looking at this photo? I mean, we look at these things now and we're like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? They were going down the beaches and they were spraying all the children. At that time, they didn't know any better. They thought it was perfectly acceptable. And guess what? Oh my gosh, they were sticking needles and putting mercury and aluminum adjuvants into all the children. And we're just still there. We still think that that's okay and that's rational and reasonable. How much longer until we look at these and realize that these are equivalents? It's the same thing. But, so we've got to pay attention to toxicity. So let's look at the organs of detoxification. The liver and the gallbladder. Okay, these are the primary organs for detoxification in the body. The liver especially, anything the liver can't process, it may store in fat. Okay, it puts the fat to get it, away from your vital internal organs. It just has to put it somewhere. So fat cells are literally storage depots. They're kind of like those underground bunkers, that you store nuclear waste in. right? You know, you can't put it out, you can't bury it in the woods, you can't throw it in somebody else's backyard. So we got to build these big concrete bunkers underground to store it away, right? Until we can find some other country to dump them, right? So, did I say that? Sorry. These toxins released again can repeat the same cycle if conditions are unchanged. So as you release the toxins back into the system, unless you change the way that the liver processes things, this cycle just repeats again because it couldn't do it before. Why is it going to be able to do it now? Okay, so the intestines now, this is the final stage of detox, especially the colon where retox can occur. This is what that means, okay? Your colon, as you get rid of these toxins, your body dumps them into your intestines for elimination, okay? Well, a lot of these are water soluble or fat soluble, you know, so the water soluble ones, as they go in with all your fecal and that material, you know that it's a more liquidy waste until it gets to your colon. And in the last stage of digestion in your colon, your body absorbs that water back into the system to form a stool, okay? So it sucks it dry, in other words, before eliminating so that you're not constantly losing your water supply. Well, in the process of pulling back in all that water, any of the water-soluble toxins are likely to get drawn back in. So your body detoxed it, yes, but now as it draws it back in, that's what we call retox. Okay, and it's just this ever-ending cycle of just pulling the toxins right back into your system. So you've got to do something to grab those for elimination. The kidneys, the issues ranging from history of stones to frequent use of Tylenol, which is one of the leading causes of kidney failure, can be reasons for concern in ability to properly filter. Okay, so if your kidneys are burning, you've got to do something to build up the integrity of the kidneys. And if you have these signs in the past, you know that you've got a likely issue. The skin, issues ranging from acne to psoriasis, often suggest an underlying detoxification issue, as the skin is one of the last orders of detoxification. So you know, you've heard before that your skin, you sweat, and you sweat toxins. Your body can actually get rid of them that way. Your skin is one of the last organs of detoxification, and probably, you know, arguably the weakest, which means as the rest of your internal organs, the liver in particular, gets overburdened, you start to see these problems manifest in the skin. Okay, so it's not always just tied to hormones. It can be tied to the way that your body is trying to deal with underlying toxicity issues. Okay, then when you look at the different things that you can do for these different components, Baseline Nutritionals has a fantastic liver cleanse program that's a detox tea and another component. You can get on their website and you can look at that, or you know, we can send you the link to that. There's a basic level colon cleanse that you can do from there. There's also a company, Spring Green. They make the detoxificant clay and intestinal cleanser, and they have a very good protocol that goes more in line with the enema aspect of it. So they have you go through a systematic enema process. The KGP flush is kidney, gallbladder, and pancreas, and it really deals with getting out all the stones and all the sludge out of your system so that it starts to process things better. These can all be effective depending on your status, but it just, you know, you just really have to know what your history is and what problems you have had in the past to know what to address. You know, or you can just start to systematically address all of them as you're going through this process. But, you know, kind of the point there is you really want to have a good process in order to make sure that your body is cleaned out before you start just dumping all these fat and toxins into your system, right? It's good to have the whole process underway ahead of time, okay? When you look at detoxification, systemic cellular detoxification is really the key. So colon cleanses, they typically only affect the digestive pathway, only what's inside the digestive tract. Whereas the most difficult toxins, as we talked about, they reside outside the digestive system, okay? They're in the cells. They're in the fat cells themselves. The fat cells are not part of the digestive system. They're packed away in the outside tissues. So you have to do something for cellular level detoxification in order to really be an effective detox process, right? So many people just talk about colon cleanse, but it's not really an effective process. And we won't even get started on the magic foot bath, not tonight. That doesn't either. Okay, once toxins are released for elimination, they are often retoxed, as we talked about, so they must be somehow bound in order to remain for elimination. So there has to be some way to capture those in the stool, and there's a couple things that are really powerful at doing that. Melt-Morillinite clay, or otherwise known as bentonite clay, activated charcoal, and then there's also information, on zeolites. That zeolites can be very powerful as well. Okay, so the systemic formulas IDS is the one that we recommend. This intracellular detoxification system specifically addresses both of these problems in a two-pronged approach. So the G cell it gives the body its needs, its nutritional needs, to produce cellular detoxification. So a lot of times the reason why people don't detox properly is because of cellular malnourishment. Okay, they don't have the proper components in order to get everything moving. Okay, so it supplies that. It doesn't force detox. It doesn't. The question we always get: does it cause diarrhea? No, it doesn't cause diarrhea. It's not a colon cleanse. It gives your body what it needs to start detoxifying. Then the bind is activated charcoal and other components in order to grab that stuff and hold it, because of course charcoal can contain a lot of excess toxins per surface area of those molecules, but it won't let go of them once you start pulling out the water. Okay, charcoal is a very good dry ingredient for capturing things. Okay. Hormone regulation assistance. The thyroid is one of the most important organs of the endocrine system, known as the thermostat of the body. So this controls metabolism for the most part. As discussed in detail in the workshop Deficient, if you guys have not gotten on and watched that, get on and watch that. That's probably easily referred as, I think, the most important workshop that we have on our YouTube channel. This one covers the big ones. So the majority of Americans fail to acquire sufficient iodine in their diet, and as a result, over 30% of Americans suffer thyroid dysfunction, and Synthroid enjoys the highest drug sales in America at 21.5 million prescriptions per month. It's insane. And almost all of this is because of iodine deficiency, the vast majority of it. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So we find supplementing with TMI first because it deals with metabolism as well. It supports the thyroid to keep it functioning and really start to churn, its proper function. Okay, so you start with that for one bottle, then you can move to the iodine synergy, which is literally just iodine and selenium. Okay, the basic raw ingredients. It's an effective protocol for restoring proper thyroid function when it's still present, of course. If people have had their thyroid removed or they've had radioactive iodine, that's mind-boggling in itself. That when you have a thyroid problem, what are we going to do? We're going to give you radioactive iodine. Why? Because we know your thyroid is going to gobble up all of that radioactive iodine. We don't know. We don't need to worry about it going anywhere else and killing anything else. We know it's going to selectively go to your thyroid. How do you know that? Because the patient's iodine deficient. That's where iodine goes. So, it's just like, how? They figured this out. They know this, but they still do it. It's mind-boggling and aggravating and everything at the same time. Okay, glucose metabolism assistance. Designs for Health Carvexime is designed to help reduce the digestion of starches and absorption of glucose while improving the digestion of protein-containing foods. This can help those who have a difficult time controlling their carbohydrate intake and are in need of blood glucose control, which can lead to greater success with healthy weight management. It features a non-GMO form of a common white bean, which is a proprietary amylase inhibitor, and then green coffee extract containing chlorogenic acid shown to assist with healthy weight management and body composition through its support of proper glucose absorption in the gut and triglyceride levels in the liver. Okay, so going back to all that we just talked about, you read all that, how it deals with triglycerides and everything, and you kind of get the picture of how all that works together. It's a blend of plant-derived proteases made with non-GMO ingredients. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the products from Plexus, okay, Plexus Slim. This is basically the same thing as one of their products. The next one here as well, the EndoTrim, is basically the same thing. You look at all of the ingredients that they talk about: white bean extract and green coffee extract, right? Those are the primary components that you see on, the signs on the health food stores and everything else for weight loss. These are big deals, okay? Designs for Health EndoTrim is a comprehensive endocrine balancing formula which focuses on healthy insulin, leptin, and cortisol function in order to support safe fat metabolism and maintenance of lean body mass. The inclusion of Garcinia cambogia and EGCG may also help to maintain and improve lean body mass and support basal metabolic rate. This unique array of nutrients and botanicals is also useful for controlling food cravings and helping the body naturally manage blood sugar levels, made again with non-GMO ingredients. So these two things, they just help your body to control the glucose levels and just move along metabolism. So they tend to help when you're in a proper weight loss process, which of course includes exercise and a proper diet. We can't discount those two things. Those two things you see are the critical ingredients that got us, most of us, down this trail in the first place. It's lack of exercise and putting too much fuel. If we go back to that image that we talked about earlier, okay, we look at this. It's too much of this and too little of this, right? So that's what gets us down that road in the first place. Okay, next one here, collagen. Collagen is a building block of connective tissue as discussed in detail in our workshop, Woven. If you get on there, that's a whole workshop that we did on just the process and utilization of collagen and where it comes into play. An important detail, though, is that collagen production decreases with age, hence the increase in signs of aging. We know wrinkles, all that stuff. That's because of the decrease in collagen production naturally within the body. As fat is released and weight is lost, extra skin is often therefore left behind. So collagen supplementation can assist in filling those voids and restoring your skin's integrity, because your body will take those collagen peptides and fragments, break them down, and then be able to actively use them to reweave new connective tissue. Okay? The intestinal tract, this is noted as well, is essentially your skin outside in. Okay? The intestinal tract is it's basically a dermal surface that's in contact from the inside with all your food and everything else. So there's also information showing that collagen can help to improve the integrity of the intestinal tract and stop leaky gut type issues as well. So we look at all those factors, we put all that together, and what it really boils down to is we have to be aware. I didn't talk a lot about diet. I didn't really talk a lot about exercise, because those are different workshops. The bottom line is start exercising on a regular basis, start to burn the calories, burn the fuel, and build muscles, which are energy combustion engines. So the more muscle that you have, the more lean muscle you have, the more efficient you are going to be at burning fat. Okay? But in addition to that, if you want, the dietary stuff, you can get a copy of our diet plans, and you can read through all that, and just follow that diet plan. We'd be glad to send it or give that all to you. Even anybody on Facebook, it's all available on our website. So those two components are kind of no-brainers. This is really just going through, these are the things you want to know and you want to address as you're going through. If you're going to do the Lipo Laser process, which works, but don't do it lackadaisically. That's what it comes down to. Is don't just, don't go back to eating, I hate to say fried chicken, but potato chips and and everything else. Get into every faux pas thing we can. Drinking soda and sweet tea and all that stuff. Not changing diet or anything. Thinking, man, here I've been going to the gym. Forget that. I'm just going to go and burn it off. And that's what we tend to think of. And surely enough, we are going to get marketed to at some point regarding that. Not from here. But that's why we make sure that we consult with every single person before they start this process, because we want to make sure that they know what steps to do along the way. Okay? So if anybody on Facebook has a question, you can leave it in the comments. Same thing on YouTube. You can leave it in the comments section. We'll answer all those. But as for now, we'll say adios, and anybody that has a question here, we can ask after we get the cameras done.